And even if I wanted to, there's no room, so I'll stay in my office. All right. Well, welcome everyone to nutrient management class. Really exciting to have all of you go through the nutrient management process. And just a little bit of background for folks. I don't even know how many years we've been doing this course, but I think we started in 2006, which was a long time ago. Um, so I apologize for the people that have done this with me for a while because we haven't really changed things a whole lot since 2006 because the material is really the same. And now I'm starting to feel old and my slides look outdated. So maybe one of these days I can like update the whole thing. But the information is really much basic information about managing crops and nutrients on your farm. And then, of course, part of the reason we do this is not only to help you hopefully grow really excellent, high quality, high yielding crops, but also to keep a close eye on the environment and how our farms can both have a positive and also can have a negative impact on the environment. And really, our goal here is to minimize any negative impacts that we might have. Um, I think we have a lot of work to do, and it is a pretty intensive process. The class goes, as everybody knows, for 6 weeks. We used to kind of put that into even a shorter period of time, but realized that it was a lot. So we really did need 6 weeks to get through the whole process. And obviously, many of you have been working on this for far more than 6 weeks, taking soil tests, working with your support people from the conservation districts, getting maps together, and some of the other pieces that you need to have a completed nutrient management plan. Let me pull my slides up here. I probably should have introduced myself first, but I'm Heather Darby, and I am an agronomist here at the University of Vermont. And I think Lindsay is the only one of our team that's at least here in St. Albans this year supporting folks. And then all of the district conservation folks and NRCS folks that have also helped farmers get ready for this class. And you know all of them already. I also just wanted to point out Abby and Anna, who are both down in the Middlebury office that work for Extension as well and provide farmers support in that area to be able to take this class. The nutrient management class, it really is pretty special. It's the only place that I know of in the country that offers such a program. And part of the reason that we decided to create a curriculum like this was because there are so few service providers here in Vermont. So normally in other places around the country, there are crop consultants and technical service providers that do this for a living. And we have very few of those in Vermont. And so farmers really needed a way to be able to develop plans on their own, working with a group of technical staff like ourselves. So that's why we started the class that long ago. Now, today, nutrient management plans, should be a great tool for your farm, but they're also a tool that is needed to be able to access or even apply for many of the state and federal cost share and conservation programs that we have. So a lot of the times people end up coming through this class so that they're able to access other programs like EQIP or even the SEAP program through the state of Vermont. And then many farmers also take the class because of regulation. And the regulations, I want to say they're relatively new, but they're not new anymore. And the regulatory requirements in Vermont obviously for a certain set of farms, need to develop a nutrient management plan. So, those are all the reasons people come through this program, and maybe, why you are sitting here as well. So again, a quick introduction to the class. We meet once a week for 6 weeks, same, Zoom link, same time, or same location. I don't think we've ever canceled a class, so just plan to be here. It's really important that you do attend, because today will seem pretty easy, and you'll think, wow, this is going to be a breeze. But as we get into each week, the second, the third, fourth in particular are really, intensive, and there's a lot of homework and work to complete. And so making sure that you come to every class is important for you to finish the plan. It's really difficult if you start missing classes. There's plenty of people, to help. You already know that. I mean, our conference room right now is packed, and it's 50-50. Half of the folks are writing plans, and the other half of the folks are there to support people that are writing the plans. So there's plenty of help. There really is no reason to fall behind in the program. We're all there to help you get through it. There's also a number of additional resources and these videos. These are being recorded and they'll be posted. So if you do miss one, or actually want to re-watch one, you can do that by going to the website, which is listed here. And I know that you've all received probably multiple times from Susan Brulette, getting folks ready for the class. So again, lots of resources there, and also the videos from each class if you need to rewatch them, or you're going to miss a class and need to watch on your own. Oop. All right, so I saw folks walking into the office today to distribute a binder to you. This binder will actually be your nutrient management plan at the end of the course. So we're going to work through basically filling in the binder step by step. And by the end of the class, again, this binder will constitute the actual NMP. You have to have a hard copy of the nutrient management plan at your farm if you are inspected. So you will be doing quite a bit of work in our computer program called GoCrop, which you'll be introduced to today. But GoCrop is not your plan. It's part of your plan. And you need to, again, have a physical copy of your entire plan on your farm. So once this is completed, you want to make sure you hold on to this and put it in a place that you remember, because if you get inspected, or when you get inspected, you'll have that handy and it will be reviewed and evaluated. All right. So again, we use GoCrop, a computer software program that was developed and is continued to be developed by the University of Vermont. And that's where you will be doing a lot of the work from here on out to create the rest of your plan. What you should have in the binder already, or you should be bringing to class, are your current soil tests, a current manure test or tests. You should have a set of maps that, again, are in the binder and were created by the district person that you've been working with. I don't believe we require soil fact sheets anymore, but you may have soil fact sheets in your binder. You also should have erosion loss numbers. We call this Russell 2 or Russell 2 numbers, and we'll go through that here today. And then there's a whole host of other important documents, probably more important to the requirements of the plan than probably to you, but there are a number of important documents that need to be in the plan. And so my suggestion is, don't start throwing out pieces of paper from the book or from your binder, because most of them are in there for very good reason, and some of them are requirements. Let me just go back here. So one of the pieces in your binder is, and then the first part of the binder is your course book, the digging in manual. So it's basically it's the textbook for this class. And you can see on the agenda that it outlines what chapters go along with which class. So again, if you're confused or you didn't quite understand something we went over in class, you can refer to the textbook and go back and read up. And it does very close to all the class and how it's taught. So again, you can use that as a resource. Also included are nutrient recommendations for field crops. That's right in the front cover. And that actually will be used also in class quite a bit. So you'll want to have that handy. There's also a copy of the required agricultural practices, and these are required of all farms in the state of Vermont. So if you're not familiar with those, I would suggest that you read this nice color summary that's provided for you. Not everything in nutrient management is covered, but most of it is. And again, these are requirements required for all farms in the state of Vermont. So again, if you're not familiar with those, it would be good to look over that handout. In the very back of your binder, just trying to get there myself, under, oops, resources, there's the nutrient management standard. And this is a standard that we will follow throughout the class. You have to meet this standard. We have to help you meet this standard. This is the standard that state and federal government follow for nutrient management. I think it's an interesting read, but it goes through step by step all the different components that need to be covered in the nutrient management plan. So you're required to meet this standard, and the course will help you do that. And the standard is in your binder if you want to read through it. Okay. So it's pretty simple. You just want to show up for class every week, listen, learn, work with the support person, the technical support that you've been connecting with already to complete each week's homework. And by the end of the 6 weeks, if you've done all the work, you'll have a completed nutrient management plan. And at that time, we'll review it, make sure it's complete, make sure that it meets the standards, answer any questions, hopefully get it printed out for you, and then you'll be finished. All right, so let's dive into nutrient management as a topic. And I've already said this once, and probably will say it 5 more times, but the goal of the class here is to help you combine your on-farm nutrient sources. So that might be manure, that might be compost, might be legume crops or cover crops. So we want to combine those nutrient sources with purchased fertilizers if needed and if desired by the farm to meet the needs of your crop and your crop production goals. So if you want to attain a certain quality or a certain yield, our goal is to take what you have on your farm first, add to it if we need to, and really work to meet your crop goals. And then at the same time, we're trying to do that by minimizing any losses of nutrients into the environment. Okay, so I want to say it's straightforward. There's a lot more detail in there, but really, again, we want to produce high quality crops and minimize nutrient losses. It's complicated. Sounds easy in the first slide, but there's a lot to consider. Obviously not going to go through all these, but a lot of it is just balancing numbers and looking at numbers. But again, there's a lot to consider when we're trying to not only, maximize crop production, but also improve soil. improve the health of the soil, the resiliency of the soil, and minimize any losses. So we're going to cover, a lot of ground here. Um, from building organic matter to rotating crops to considering cover crops to maintaining adequate pH levels. All of those topics we'll go over and try to integrate them into your plan, as you, the farmer, sees fit. So I already went over this a bit. There's a lot of reasons why you should write a nutrient management plan. Um, there's a lot of reasons why people do it. And, these are just three of them, economics, environment, and then public relations. In all the years I've been doing this class, I don't think, you know, managing our image with the public hasn't been at the forefront of what are some of the major concerns for the farmers that attend the class. And so, I don't think always people realize that, they could improve the viability of their farm by, going through this program, because the emphasis really has been on the environment. But this plan can be so much more for you and your farm, but again, it's up to you on how you sort of choose to utilize the plan and also develop it. From an economic perspective, I always look at this, from two different angles. One is if you're purchasing fertilizers, you have a lot of potential on your farm to produce nitrogen or to manage any of the manure possibly that you produce as fertilizers, right? So making sure that you're doing that properly, making sure that you're accounting for the actual nutrients that are in the manure that you have, or maybe the manure that you're purchasing. There are many vegetable farms and other livestock operations that buy in manure, and just making sure that you know what's in it and what rates you're applying it at and what your crops are actually getting so that you're utilizing those resources to the maximum capacity. And that ultimately will help you grow better crops. But if you are buying fertilizers or you see that maybe you should, you're putting that money where it needs to go and you're only spending what you actually need, and not above that. Fertilizer is expensive. So we want to make sure that you're really understanding what you need and how much and where. The other thing over the years that I feel a little bit like people pay less attention to, because again, the emphasis has really been on the environment, is the impact that properly managing nutrients can have on your crop quality and yields, right? Crops, plants in general, they need a certain amount of nutrients, they need certain types. And if we're not giving them what they need, not just fertility wise, but also, sort of the soil media itself, they're not going to produce high yields or quality. And, I often see, I would say more so farms that are really deficient in nutrients and not meeting the needs of the crops, and wondering why, they have to buy feed now. I have so many acres, but I'm still buying feed. So really thinking about where to invest nutrients and soil management. Where can you invest on your farm and get the biggest return on your investment is important, because taking care of the soil will improve crop yields, especially if you're meeting the overall needs of those crops in the way that they want their needs met. And this is just a graph from a project that a friend of mine, actually, not me myself, but I always felt like this stood out, where they were managing a herd of milking cattle. And actually, this is in California. And she had just taken over managing the dairy farm at this university. And she was not a soil scientist, but she saw how poorly, the fields were doing in the pastures. There just wasn't a lot there to eat. They were having to buy a lot of grain. So she started working with a bunch of her friends that were soil scientists, me included, and started thinking about, well, what if I took a soil test and maybe I could improve the quality and yields of the crops here, and the university wouldn't have to buy feed anymore. And so that's what she did. She amended the soils based on, what the soil test said she needed, versus what they were doing. And you can see there was an increase in the relative forage quality of the pasture. He was really excited about this, thinking that, well, if I take care of the soil, I can actually produce more and better crops. And ultimately, they ended up producing more milk as well from the feed or the pasture that those cattle were utilizing. So, economically, she figured out that that return on investing in their own soil, right, and improving how much and the quality of what they were getting had a pretty big return in the bulk tank, and it was worth the financial investment to them. So again, this is a big priority of ours, especially if you're struggling in that area. Um, again, we know that manure has a high nutrient value, and it's really important to our farms to be able to fertilize their crops. And here's just another image that shows how much or how many nutrients, and these are just the macronutrients, N, P, and K, but manure offers way more than that in 1,000 gallons of manure. And this is, um, just an estimate. But then you can see if you're removing a ton of dry matter, how many nutrients you actually remove from that, right? So a lot of people don't realize that every time you harvest a ton of hay, or you're out there grazing your cattle, that you're taking nutrients away. And are you putting back what you're removing? Are you putting back more than what you're removing, so your application rates are really high, or are you not putting back enough? So these are some of the things we're going to look at on each one of your fields to really understand, is there a balance there? Are we over applying? Are we under applying? Or are we just right? The other component that we really like to push in our class is optimizing the, production of legumes on your farm. So we'll learn more about this as we go through class, but the class of plants or the family of plants, legumes, they have the ability to work with microbes to make nitrogen. And you can see from this study that we conducted, if you're only growing grass out in a hayfield or a pasture, it's less productive than if you have grass mixed with legumes. Now, of course, you can fertilize the grass with nitrogen fertilizers and get a significant yield boost. You can see it's double versus not doing it at all. But nitrogen fertilizer costs money. And for folks that also are organic, not only does it cost money, but it's widely not really that available to you. So we can increase yields and we can increase quality by making sure that we have diverse stands out in our fields. So again, just another piece that we'll be looking at. Skip over that for now. But again, showing the impact of growing grass with clover versus just grass alone. Now, I'll tell you, these are still good yields for most farms, but when we add clover to the mix, we're producing almost a ton more of dry matter from a field. So again, if you're not fertilizing enough with nitrogen on that grass, it's going to be, I don't want to say unproductive, but maybe not as productive as you need it to be. And the quality will be lower. Again, we will be looking at environment, related to how you apply nutrients and when and what. And we're looking at both losses of nutrients to the air, so through volatilization. We're going to be looking, primarily, I'll say, at nutrients that we lose to surface water. So, rivers, streams, lakes, those that generally are lost through runoff or erosion. And then we're also going to look at groundwater losses that are a big issue in many parts of the state for sure. And, in general, we don't want to lose nutrients anywhere. We want them to go up into our plants so that we benefit, from the nutrients we put on the field, and we don't harm, the resources around. So class will be trying to manage any of these losses. Um, Relatively new, I guess, but not that new. If you do have tile drainage or subsurface drainage on your farm, we will be evaluating risk of loss of nutrients from tiles and trying to manage that as well. I don't want to say this, is uncommon. It's becoming increasingly common that people have subsurface drainage. And so we just want to make sure that fields are being managed so that we're minimizing loss out of the tiles. So let's talk a little bit about public perception. So, we want to write a plan to improve economics, improve yields, quality, herd health, livestock health, crop health. We want to protect the environment. But, it's becoming increasingly difficult to protect our image and, be looked at as stewards of the land and protectors of, our communities and the natural resources around us. Most of the public has no connection to farming anymore. Everybody knows that. Even in Vermont, where we're small and we're primarily rural, we've lost a lot of our farms and really that connection of agriculture, to the people around us. And there is definitely, often really negative, a lot of negativity around agriculture in general, especially livestock operations. And, a lot of that is news, Facebook, social media, media in general. And, it's really important for us as farmers to, advocate for what we do. And a nutrient management plan, although it sounds maybe a little hokey, but, it is power. Knowledge is power. And the more you know about really what you're doing to protect the environment, the more you can feel confident about sharing that with the people around you. And there have been so many times in the 20 years that I've been here that a nutrient management plan has actually really helped farmers navigate issues or questions, with neighbors or people that they might rent land to, you know. Uh, you're out there soil sampling and people want to know what you're doing and you can tell them all about it. I'm really trying to take care of what's in my soil and build soil health and not put too many nutrients on and protect the environment. So again, being able to talk about what you're doing to protect the environment and feeling confident about that is really important. And it's also really needed because, again, people make a lot of assumptions about what you're doing without any real knowledge. And, people really do have, many people have negative, you know, um, images, especially around our larger farms, again, because they're big and big is bad. And so, people driving by here by this picture, no matter what they're doing, it's not good. Uh, and so again, just trying to really protect our image and, kind of turn around people's thoughts on agriculture in general. All right, so regulation is the other reason that most people need to write a nutrient management plan. And I already mentioned the required agricultural practices and the summary that's in your binder. So this is required of all farms in the state of Vermont, regardless of size, regardless of type, everybody has to follow these. Um, and then there are different standards, especially as related to nutrient management based on farm size. Okay, so certified small farm operations, medium farm operations, and large farm operations or CAFOs have to have nutrient management plans that follow this 590 standard. And that was the standard that I kind of showed you. Maybe you could see it through the camera. I'm not really sure, but it's in your binder. So again, this is a regulatory requirement, which means that, we have to make sure your plans meet this. We have to make sure that this plan is something that you are really willing to adopt and implement if you're not already doing the things in the plan, because it is regulatory. And if you do fall in one of these categories, there is a inspection process, there's a um, permitting process, and so you really need to feel confident with what's in your plan and your ability to implement it. And again, it's a summary. There's like a bigger booklet, but I think this covers really well in beautiful photographs what's being required of you in the state of Vermont. And then again, you're going to be creating an MP that meets the 590 standard here, and that will help you meet one of the requirements of the RAPs. But again, it has to be implemented. And writing the plan does take a lot of time, but implementing the plan is a whole nother, piece. That's up to you. All right, so here's a picture of the standard. It's in your binder. Again, you can take our word for it that that's what we're following. But of course, you're also welcome to read it and really understand what's being asked of you. So I was going to go through some of the requirements of the nutrient management plan, just like a bigger overview so you know what you're going to be doing here over the next 6 weeks. And, we'll just start with protecting surface water. So there are regulatory requirements that put buffers into place, 25-foot buffers along surface water is a requirement in the state of Vermont. And that has to be perennial vegetation. Of course, it can be riparian buffers, can include trees and shrubs. It can be grass buffers as well, but it has to be there. And that is a requirement of the state of Vermont for all farms. You also have to now have a 10-foot buffer along ditches on both sides of a ditch. And then there's also a requirement of a buffer of 100 feet up to surface water on a 10% average slope for annual cropland. Now, working with your technical provider through the districts, these will all be outlined for you on maps. And of course, we'll be working with you if you don't have those buffers into place to help make sure they go into place. There are also requirements around groundwater protection and the distance that you need to keep from public wells and also private wells, both buffers, but also manure application. And that's for all of these buffers and fertilizer applications. Okay, so you have to have soil tests to take this class. They can only be 2 years old for a new plan. So if you're starting a new plan through this class, those soil tests can't be any older than 2 years old. And then after that, you need to have new soil tests every 3 years. Okay, so every 3 years, you should be taking new soil tests. And you also have to have yearly manure tests. There are some requirements around the soil tests, but if you all used Dairy One or UVM labs, then you are using the modified Morgan's extractant, which is a requirement for having a valid soil test in the state of Vermont, and to write a plan. So if you don't have this type of analysis, we can't write a plan for you or with you. Okay. We will need crop information and soil information for each field on your farm. So that means we need to have soil type, texture. We need to know the crops you're growing and the rotations that you're using. And these rotations have to meet what we call T, which is the tolerable soil loss. We'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. And then we'll also need to know your yield goals, right? So we need to know what you're growing. We need to know how much those crops are yielding, and even how much you may want them to yield if they're not yielding that much right now. And then we need to have soil tests for those fields. And then we need to know a bunch of other soil information. So some of this you'll have up here in your head or in your record books, and other pieces will be provided for you. Okay, we need a bunch of nutrient information. So what nutrients do you have on your farm? For many people, this will be manure or compost. So if you have livestock and you're producing manure, we need to know how much, right? And oftentimes, that manure is combined with bedding, maybe feed, barnyard runoff, rainwater if you have a manure pit, sometimes gray water or anything coming out of the milk house or from like washing your equipment. So we need to have an estimate of how much of all of this is being produced on your farm, because we are going to want to know what's in it, right? And then we're going to want to figure out how we take all of that manure and distribute it on your farm in a way that makes sense for you and your crops and the environment. So if we don't know what we're working with, we can't complete the plan. A lot of people don't really know how much, waste is being produced on the farm. And so, the person that you're working with will help you figure that out. Okay. We do have some spreadsheets that we can use. Some people have really good numbers, they keep track of this. So we'll do a calculation, plus look at whatever records you have and try to come up with a really good estimate. Okay. And then we need to know, how you're storing the manure on your farm, etc. So we have to have that information. From all of this, we'll calculate nutrient budgets for the farm. So basically, what do you have on your farm? And then how much are the crops removing? And just trying to get a sense of, do you have too much manure for the land base that you have or not? And this is a really important question, especially from an environmental perspective. So we'll be looking at that for each farm. Okay. We'll be conducting a variety of what we call risk assessments. And, really, again, this is one of the environmental pieces. So the biggest, I think, most complex risk assessment that we do is evaluating the risk of phosphorus loading and loss into surface waters. So I think most people know that phosphorus is the primary nutrient that we are concerned about from an environmental perspective in Vermont, but also nitrogen. So especially in certain areas of the state, like the Connecticut River Valley in particular, we are actually a little bit more worried about nitrogen leaching than phosphorus loss. But again, we'll be assessing, these nutrient loss potentials for each field on your farm. And again, we have to make sure that we're minimizing the risk of loss. Okay. So once we get all those pieces together, we will start, in the end, the last kind of thing that we do is the most fun part in my mind, which is field by field recommendations. So for each field on your farm and the crop that you're growing, we'll look at what the need of the crop is based on the soil test, and then we'll start to figure out um, what we're going to do to meet those needs and any limitations that we can address on that field. And we'll look at fertilizers, we'll look at manure, compost, whatever it is you're interested in doing there, and start putting it on the field and seeing if we can both meet the environmental requirements and the crop requirements for each field on your farm. All right. Once we get through that, we're done. Seems easy. I think that took me 6 minutes to get through, but it's going to take you 6 weeks to get through it in class. Okay, so that's just a basic overview of, kind of what we're going to do over the next 6 weeks. I'm going to stop for a second and just ask if there's any questions from anybody. Again, just trying to give people a basic overview of the class, what a nutrient management plan is, why we want to do it. Hopefully get you really excited about coming to class and, working through the process. I will say most people, the majority of the people that take the class learn a lot. And probably the most valuable thing is, the knowledge that they gain learning about soil and what their crops need. There's always some really great surprises. People didn't realize their pH was really low, or wow, I can't believe how deficient this field is. But whoa, look at this field, it's so high in nutrients. So hopefully you've had a chance, if you have your soil test, just to at least take a little glance through those and get a sense of how things are looking on the farm and start thinking a little bit about, you know, uh, what we're going to do to address any challenges and or just, maintain things where we need to do that. All right. So now we're actually going to get into the plan itself, and the first pieces of homework. Yes, I did say homework. Nobody wants to hear that after they get out of school, but this is school. And I said fun. I'm not sure if fun and school go together, but anyway, I think it does. The great thing about this kind of school is that it directly impacts your operation. So there should be no doubt in your mind why you're here. And that hopefully at least some portions will be very, very relevant to you and what you want to accomplish on your farm. But I just want to go through some of the first requirements and some of the boxes that we can check off of the nutrient management checklist, so that we can really get into the nitty gritty. So as part of your plan, you need to have a set of maps. And there are a number of different maps that you need. And, these maps we'll actually use throughout the class. They, are used to build your plan in many cases, and also, used to inform a regulator possibly about, where buffer should be, helps where a regulator is expecting a buffer to be, and by regulation where they should be. It also helps us identify soil types, which influence nutrient recommendations and also crop productivity, obviously. So again, there's a set of maps that you have to meet the requirements of the plan. And those should be in your binder now or going to be. They'll be and have been produced by the Conservation District technical staff that you have been working with, or possibly somebody from NRCS or Extension. And what you need to do is make sure that each field on your farm that will go into the plan is represented on these maps. Okay, because that is a requirement. The fields that you're including in your nutrient management plan will be represented on each one of the maps, right? That I'm going to show you. So that's your homework. Look at the maps. Make sure all your, land is there, the fields are there, everything is correct. And write down to some of the buffers or the surface water or whatever it might be. You just want to make sure things are accurately represented, because again, it is a regulatory document. So you want to make sure everything is there. Okay, so one of the maps you will have is a watershed and proximity map. May not look exactly like this. I mean, the nice thing with maps is the people that make them, everybody seems to have their own style, the colors they like to use, the shading. But again, the critical component here is that you have a watershed and proximity map, okay? Oftentimes they're combined, maybe they're separate. And you have one of these, right? And it represents all the fields that you're managing in the plan on your farm. So here's an example of a watershed and a proximity map. So here are these long sets of numbers here. These are like watershed codes, and we need to know what watershed your farm is in. So you'll need to put that in the plan. So that's why these codes are here, okay? You'll also need to know why that watershed is impaired. And you can see here, this hatch mark shows you that these are impaired watersheds. And then up here, you can see it says PCBs. So it's probably impaired from PCBs. And there's lots of reasons for impairment. And you'll see those when you start building the plan. But you need to have the watershed code for your primary farmstead area, and then you'll need to know if it's impaired or not. All right. A proximity map, and this one is combined, shows you kind of where your farm is next to everything around you. So it kind of is a little bit zoomed out, so you can see where the farm is relative to what's around it. Okay. All right. So, you also need to have this map that has lots of different names for it. And, I think there's the conservation plan map. There's, I guess, a number of names for it. But this should look pretty familiar to most of you. This map actually outlines the FSA track and field numbers with acres and whether or not it's highly erodible or not, okay, for your farm. So many of you have seen these before. You have, seen something like this, usually from FSA. But what's really important is the acres, and also the actual track and field number. So every field on your farm, once you start putting it into your plan, has to be identified with an FSA track and field number. You can put your own farm name for that field, but you also have to put the FSA track and field number. This is really important. So, and then you have to put the acres as designated by the FSA maps. Okay, and people argue about these all the time, but this information will go into the plan. So you need to have the map. Okay, you also will need a soils map. And again, every field that you're putting into the plan needs to be on the soils map. And you can see this is a colorful one. It includes all the different soil types in the fields, and you can still see the track and field number, obviously important, but then you also see all of these different colors of kind of browns and reds, and those outline the soil types in those fields. And so you can see in this field number 7, big 50-acre field, there's a number of soil types in here. And you will have to put the predominant soil type for the field in the plan. And we will use the predominant soil type for a whole number of outputs, right? We'll use it for nutrient recommendations. It's used to estimate soil loss. It's used to estimate phosphorus loss. So we'll have to pick the predominant soil type and use that in your plan. Okay. Frequently flooded map. That is a tongue twister. Say that 10 times fast. I can't even say it once fast. Frequently flooded maps are only generated, you'll only have these if you are on frequently flooded ground. Okay, so if you don't have it, if you don't have frequently flooded fields, you won't have a map. All right. Then we have what we call resource concern map or environmental concern map. Again, lots of different names for it. This outlines wells. It can outline other sensitive areas. It'll outline wetlands often, or endangered plants sometimes. So these again are layers that are coming from databases, that have been classified through the state, right? So if wells are showing up on your farm that aren't actually there, you should make sure that that is corrected, because again, there's requirements around wells. This map often shows, the surface water running through your farm. It'll show ponds. In some cases, the map person making the map will also put the required buffers, right? So remember I said there's a 25-foot buffer requirement around surface water. So you can see on this map, the buffers have been drawn. Sometimes you'll have a separate map just for buffers. So, the take-home message is you need to have a resource concern map, but you also need to have a map where it displays the required buffers for your farm. And again, you need to check these. Maybe there isn't any surface water where these buffers are being required. Or maybe there's surface water and there's no buffer there. So again, make sure you're looking over these maps. Okay. Again, here's a Vermont farm buffer setback map. These may show areas where you can see in this example, there's a public well, and it shows your setback area and fields that are impacted by that. Again, you may not have this map, especially if you don't have, a certain requirement that would make sure that you had this map for your farm. A farm practice map often is included in your binder. And again, this depends on, how closely you're working with district conservationist or not a district staff member to become enrolled maybe in EQIP or another program. So these maps actually outline different practices that you might be enrolled in or signed up to implement. Sometimes there's suggestions of where these practices could also be best used. Field stacking maps. So if you are field stacking manure, there should be a map that outlines where you are doing that. And there are regulations and requirements around where you stack manure in the winter time or really any time. So hopefully, whoever you're working with has paid close attention to those requirements. and that you're stacking manure in fields or areas that meet the regulations. Okay. So again, there is a list of the maps that are required in your binder, and your service provider is here, at least in this office. So you just want to make sure that you have those. They might still be working on them. They may have questions for you, but by the time we finish this class, we need to have, the accurate set of maps for your farm. Okay. Let's quickly get into soil fact sheets. Again, soil fact sheets have sort of become a thing of the past for most planners, but they do have a lot of really useful information on them that is included, in the NMP other ways. It's also in GoCrop, which is the software we'll use. So, more or less, most people have stopped printing these out. But it used to be a requirement to have a soil fact sheet for every soil type that you had on your farm. And again, a lot of the information in the plan that we use comes from these fact sheets. Most all of this is kind of digital now. It's in kind of big databases that we can access. So there's sort of been less of a need to feel like those should be included in the binders. So you may have these, you may not. Again, the information that you need from them, is provided in other ways as well. So, don't get too worried if you don't have soil fact sheets available to you. But the soil fact sheets do cover some information, again, that is required to build your plan. And some of that information includes, the slope of the field. So here's just an example of a soil type that's pretty common in Franklin County. And it's Enosburg loamy fine sand. And it has a 0 to 3% slope. So we do use the slopes, to build certain parts of the plan. The other part of the soil fact sheet that we utilize is the description of drainage. Is it a poorly drained field? Is it well drained? Is it moderately well drained? And we use that information to develop nutrient recommendations, because nutrients sort of act differently depending on how well or how poor a soil is drained. All right. So if you go down the soil fact sheet, there's a lot of other information here that gets utilized. One of the most critical pieces that we use is this value over here that's called T. And you can see that the Enosburg loamy fine sand has a T value of 5. And again, T is the tolerable soil loss. And it is a requirement for you to meet T on each field that you're farming that's in the nutrient management plan. That is a regulatory requirement for the state of Vermont. So why? Why do we need to meet T? So the tolerable soil loss is essentially the amount of soil that can be lost per acre per year from a field with this soil type and still be able to kind of regenerate and recover, right? So the deeper a soil generally, in the less slope of a field, the higher the T value. So this is basically saying that this field is able to regenerate soil fast enough that if you're losing 5 tons of soil per acre per year, that's okay. The state says that's fine. Now, clearly, I'm hoping that everybody's going, wow, that's a lot of soil, because it is, and we don't want to lose any soil. Most of you are paying a mortgage and you're paying for the land and you're paying for the soil. So minimizing soil loss is really, really critical to us, hopefully to you, and to, the nutrient management plan and meeting regulations. Okay. And every soil is, different. If this was, had a higher slope, that T value would go down. And I know a lot of you probably have experienced this just through working with FSA, right? Where you have highly erodible land and you can't plow it or you can't grow corn, right? Because it's too erodible. And so the T level or factor for those fields is probably really low, like it might be 1 or it might be 2. And it's really difficult to meet T when you have very low for soil loss. Okay. Now, our goal here is to make sure you're meeting T. And some of that clearly has to do with the soil type itself, but it also has to do with your management. So we want to make sure that however you're managing the soil, that you're able to minimize soil loss, at least to T, okay? And we're gonna go through that here in a minute. Okay, remember, I told you this is a lot and this is the easy class, so we're gonna keep going. The soil fact sheet also has a lot of other information that you'll need for the plan, like flooding frequency, hydrologic group, which kind of describes the drainage, and depth to seasonal high water table, depth to bedrock. All of these characteristics impact nutrient management, soil management, and environmental loss one way or the other. So that's why they're included in the plan. Okay, again, much of this information is available in other ways, so you don't necessarily have to have a fact sheet right at your fingertips. The other thing about the fact sheet is that it kind of summarizes yield potential for this field. So down here towards the bottom, you can see agricultural yield data, and it'll tell you sort of the estimated yield potential for different crops. So you can see here that this soil type can support a corn silage crop of about 18 tons per acre. It can support a grass hay crop of about 3 tons per acre. It can support a grass clover grazing pasture at 5.6 animal units per acre. Okay, so it gives us a sense of what the yield potential is for this field, which is important because you will be asked what the yield potential is for that field. And if you don't have that information from records or your own personal knowledge, then you may have to use the soil fact sheet information to fill in that piece. Okay. All right. Here's a very different soil, just for comparison. This is a Cabot, extremely stony, fine sandy loam with a 0 to 3% slope. Okay, this is also a poorly drained soil type, but it's not very deep, right? And it says stony, and and often shallow. And what I want you to notice here is that the T, the erosion or the tolerable soil loss, is much lower. So if you have soils on your farm that are a Cabot, stony fine sandy loam, you're only going to be able to lose 2 tons of soil per acre per year instead of 5. And that can have, an impact on what you do from a nutrient management perspective. It can actually impact when you apply manure, what kind of crops that you grow, etc. So it is really a critical part of building the plan that we estimate soil loss on your farm and that the soil loss meets T. Okay. All right. So let's again see, what time is it? Getting near lunchtime. So I want to get through Russell 2, which is how we calculate or estimate soil loss on your farm. Okay, so you know that you have to meet T. That's the tolerable soil loss. Well, how do I know what I'm losing or potentially losing? How do I know that? How do I know I'm meeting T? Now, of course, we have a way to predict that or estimate that, but it is just an estimation. So, it's a model, and the model is called the Revised Universal Soil Loss Equation. That's where this acronym Russell 2 comes in. So, this is a model computer program that will estimate soil loss from each field on your farm, okay? Depending on the soil type, rainfall, slope, and management, and some other items too. But it basically kind of combines the inherent properties of the soil with how you manage those. And it predicts soil loss, okay? And that predicted value has to meet T or be lower. All right. So Russell 2, this model really only estimates soil loss from rill erosion. Oops, I don't show other types. Primarily from rill erosion and sheet erosion. Sorry, here's a picture of sheet erosion. Here's a picture of rill erosion. You may or may not have seen this on your farm, but that's what we're estimating with Russell 2. Okay. We are not estimating gully erosion. And I know this looks not like Vermont, but we do have gully erosion in Vermont. And, I would suggest if you have gully erosion, and I've seen it, I've seen gullies in fields in Vermont that are, could fit a school bus, that you really should reach out to one of us to help work on that. Okay, that's a much bigger issue that needs to be addressed, but not necessarily addressed in your nutrient management plan. Right. So again, we're addressing, rill and sheet erosion primarily. Most of that in Vermont is caused by water and movement of water. And of course, with all the precipitation this year, we have a lot of erosion throughout the state. And again, protecting that soil is critical for you as a farmer, but also for the environment. So again, we use this model called Russell 2 to predict what the erosion is on your farm, and that includes, climate, soil, topography, and land use. So what you're actually doing on your farm. So you have control over this. You don't have control over this. And what can we do, or what can you do within your own management to make sure we're minimizing the risk of erosion? All right, so we already described T, again, the tolerable soil loss. So what we tolerate for that soil type with that slope and those characteristics. And in Vermont, you have to meet T. That is a regulatory requirement for every single farm. Okay, so again, how do you know that? You're going to be told through class what the T is for each field on your farm. Okay. And then through class and through work with your technical service providers, you're going to learn what your predicted soil loss is for the fields on your farm. Okay. So they're going to take all the information from you and the information about the soil, topography, climate, and they're going to predict soil loss. And you'll get that number as well. Okay, so here's some examples of what this might look like. And again, this looks different depending on who you're working with. But up on the top of this printout, so you should get a printout that outlines, the fields we're looking at. So here's track number 782, field number 1. This could be a lot of fields, could just be one field. Okay. It's going to describe the soil. Okay. And in this case, it's Buckland loam, 3 to 8% slope. And the T, the tolerable soil loss for this soil in this field is 3 tons per acre per year. Okay, so then down below that, there are usually options. And you can see here it's called alternatives. But usually there, is a list, and there actually might only be one as well, of management. Okay, so usually there's current management, what you're doing, followed up by other options. Okay, and again, the whole point here is that what you're doing on your farm needs to meet T. So in this case, the farm was in a rotation, and you can see it's described here: corn silage, spring disc, 5 years of corn, 5 years of legume, 3 cuts, manure, etc. And the predicted soil loss is 4.3, right? So that doesn't meet T. So you can't do this anymore, right? It's a requirement to meet T. So below that is an alternative. And you may like it, you may not like it, right? It does meet T. You can see it's 2.1 is the soil loss. Now, how is it different? Well, in this case, there's less years of corn. There's, maybe no-till, maybe cover crops, right? So how can you reduce erosion? So in some cases, you may have to start managing those fields differently to meet T. In many cases, what you're doing meets T and maybe better. So, that's what these printouts will show you, and everybody in class should be receiving one or more of these. Now, I'm going to skip over this. All right. If you are in a rotation where you're growing multiple types of crops over, a series of years, so you're not a monoculture or continuous crop, shouldn't say monoculture. So a continuous crop could be continuous corn, but in most cases, a continuous crop for many people is hay, right? So they have a permanent hay field. They never plow it up or they never reseed it. It's always hay. Okay, so in that case, you're only going to have one number. But if you are growing multiple types of crops or you're reseeding your hay fields often, you will have your soil loss for the rotation, plus you will have soil loss for each year in the rotation. And that is what this handout is showing. So up here, you have your field. It tells you the T value. Okay, it's field 555-5, tree stand field. It's Munson silt loam, 3 to 8% slope. The tolerable soil loss, right? T is 2. What the farmer is doing currently does not meet T. Okay, again, this is 4 years of corn, 4 years of hay. It's not meeting T. It's too high. Okay, there's 3.43 tons per acre per year of soil loss. and that's averaged across the whole rotation. And it's an average of the numbers next to it. So you can see this is erosion by year. And you can see in the first year of corn, let's say it's pretty high. It gets higher, more years in corn. The field gets seeded down. In the seed down year, erosion is very high, 5.7. And then once it's seeded down, the amount and established, the amount of erosion goes way down. Okay. When you average all that together, it's 3.43. Okay? So you need to meet T across the entire rotation. So this field is not meeting T right now with the current management, but the bottom option allows the farm to meet T. Okay. And then it also shows you erosion by year again. And not every year meets T. So this 2.6 does not meet T, but across the whole rotation, it does. And that is the regulatory requirement, that you have to meet T across the rotation. Okay. You're given both sets of information because you have to put in the erosion loss for each year in the rotation, even though you're regulated around the average. Each year in the rotation will be used in the phosphorus index, okay, which we'll get to a couple classes from now. Okay, whoo, that was a lot. I wasn't lying. Wake up, wake up, wake up. I can see you all sleeping. That's why you don't have your cameras on. I wouldn't either. It's a lot what I just went through. Okay. And there's going to be a little bit more yet to come. I think we'll break for lunch and come back to that. But I want to make note that right now for your homework, you need to look at your maps, make sure they're accurate and what they're accurate and they represent each field on your farm that will be included in the plan. And then the other piece that you will need to do for homework is to look at your soil loss numbers and make sure they meet T. And or you don't have them. I see Lauren shaking her head. I'm not sure. She's like, we don't have those yet. But yeah. Okay. So if you don't have them yet, it's Lauren's homework. No, just kidding. But that is something we want you to do, is to make sure not only that what is displayed there meets T, but you accept that, right? And if you have to do something different, that you're okay with what that different is, right? We don't want you to sign on to something you're not going to be able to follow through with, because these are things that you are regulated around. So let's try to make it work for you. All right, so let's, I think, take a lunch break, and then we'll get into your additional homework after lunch. Okay.
I'm going to start by showing. Okay, we're going to get started here. And I will start by just showing folks how to sign in or up into GoCrop, depending on what your situation is. So here you can see on my screen and the up, first of all, open your browser. If possible, please use GoCrop in Chrome. We noticed that it doesn't work as easily or smoothly in Firefox, and particularly even less well in Edge. So what? No. I don't know if you can hear the jokes that are going on about GoCrop being finicky for that. But so, all right, so you open up your browser, you go to GoCrop, you go to gocrop.com, GOCROP.com, and then it brings you to this home screen, and you have these two buttons, sign up or sign in. If you have an existing GoCrop account, you'll click sign in. and it will take you to this sign-in page where you enter your email and your password. For folks who have not yet created an account, you will click sign up. Oh, yeah, thank you, folks. So on, this is an aside for folks in the St. Albans office who are using some of our computers. To get in your password is written in a little piece of white paper in the upper left. I think it's capital STA, capital LAB. Yes, St. Albans, yes. We're gonna give folks a couple moments to get situated here.
Carrie's gonna end up working with you on stuff. I don't know if you rearrange.
I can, do you want me to get up and Autumn can come to right here?
Is that an option?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind swapping seats with Kate? Sure. Carrie was gonna help be your data entry person.
Okay.
Kate, if you want to here, you're gonna be great.
Yeah.
My partner's not here today, so.
You get to go home.
Yeah.
Oh, so I'm just moving it around. Delete everything I just typed.
So if you're now in the sign up phase, use an email address that you have access to. And by you in this case, I am referring to the farmer that is either here in the class or you are working with. If you are a TSP or a TA, technical service provider, technical assistance provider, please do not use your personal email to create an account for the farmer you're working with. So this should be the farmer's email account.
Password, is this the password that I'm choosing with this one?
It's the password. So when you are entering a password, please choose your password, something you will remember. That will be easy for you. And yes, please write it down somewhere. I've got a little sticky if you want to write it down and share it with someone that you're working with so that we can have a record of it. If you do not feel comfortable sharing your email or your password, that's okay. But maybe you might want to write it down for your own reference later. It's not uncommon for us to find that we're working with someone and a year later they go into their GoCopper account and they say, I can't remember my password. And that's easy enough to be able to reset your password. What's harder is if you also forget what your email address or your login is as well. So please at least write that down. Just gonna make sure I type this right. Oh, is it possible that you have created an account before?
I have no business names.
Yeah. You can create it. That's okay. You can say your
All of my
farm.
goats are registered under the borrowed homestead because until now I never had my own home to stead on. So all of my, rather than change all my registration, because all of us only just borrow our existence here anyway. So I'll just stay with the borrowed homestead.
When you're entering an email address, please make sure it is an account that you have access to and that you use. And part of the reason why I'm stressing this is that in order to continue on using your account, you'll have to click a confirmation email. I know that we're having some interesting email issues in this corner. We'll troubleshoot that a little bit later. All right, then for your profile, you're going to put in your name, your phone number, your business name. For this example, I'm going to put in Heather because she'll be using this, or I'll put Fantastic Farmer. It's my default name here. Let's make that you'll put in your phone number, business name, and then your user type. For most folks here, you're put down farmer. There are options to create to invite people to your account. And in that case, they might identify more as a crop consultant and you could invite them to your account to view what's going on. If you have questions about that, we can get into that a little bit later. You'll choose your farm type from the drop-down menu. And then you'll choose your acres managed. After that,
leased and owned, right?
So yes, thank you.
Minimum.
That's a great question. So in our neck of the woods, someone asked, acres managed, is that just owned? Is it just leased? Is it both? Acres managed would be both, leased and owned. We'll click sign up. Okay, now it takes you directly to the sign in page. And so what happens when I try to log in immediately? Because I'm just,
You have no farms.
so I'm ready to go. If you are working on a personal computer, feel free to click remember me. If you're working on one of our lab computers, you might not want to click remember me because you might not want your email and your password saved. If you click logged in, you then get a pop-up. I'm not sure if you can see this on our end. You can't because of this thing is blocking it. And you can see my face.
Excited about it.
There we go. You have to confirm your email address before continuing. So this is why it was really important to use an email address that you have access to. So for example, I got a confirmation email address here in my GoCrop account or my Gmail account. And we can see that it is right in my inbox. So it's really easy to find, but there are times when this information gets lost somewhere in the netherworld of emails. You don't necessarily see it in your inbox. If you click more, you might see an all mail, and then sometimes so you might need to go to all mail to see this email if you don't see it immediately in your inbox. Might just try to hide it from you for a moment. So look in all your boxes in your email account for your invitation if you can't find it immediately. So yeah. So then you have this email, really easy. Just click confirm my account to confirm your account. And this, one of the reasons why we do this is because if we have any updates or any information that GoCrop as a tool needs to share with you, it has a registered email that it can contact you at. So from here, now we can enter in our NMP example 2024 and our password that we created. And because I'm going to use this computer every time, I'm going to click remember me so I don't have to do that later. And then I'll click log in. And we are now here where we have no farms. Heather, do you want me to keep rolling with this or do you want to take over here?
No, I mean, you're in there. So if you want to walk them through the first set of homework by starting the NMP and filling out the information stuff, that would be great.
Okay. Awesome. I'll see how much of that I can do. So now you're at your farms. You have no farms, and you'll see that in GoCrop a lot, when you need to create something new, you go to an orange button in the right-hand corner, new farm. So we'll click that. And now you're going to enter your farm details. Your farm details in this case are probably going to be really similar to the details you just entered for your profile information. So it's a little bit of redundancy, but we got some information for your profile, some information for your farm. So take a little bit of time to write this in. And as you click through, you can see that some prompts and come up. So like, for example, here when it says your name, it's asking for your farm name, not your personal human name.
No.
So I heard that question. We will get to that in a moment. So if you guys can just wait for a second. So one thing I will note is that I'm putting in a bunch of obviously fake places, which is actually not great for this example. So I'm going to put St. Albans because one of the nice things that it does do based off of your farm location is it'll drop your map right there. And so that's really helpful. And then you'll choose your county. Some folks, you might have land in multiple counties. I think for this purpose, pick the county where your farm, like barnyard location is. All right, so for folks who are just starting a new account, a new license, I'm going to actually ask you to unclick use Vermont NMP free trial because I'd really like you to get set up using your coupon code today. Just so that we don't have to go through it a little bit later. So unclick that and then we'll save your farm. It will ask you for your billing information. If you are updating your accounts, you may need to update your card, and we do have coupon codes to reduce the cost of GoCrop for folks who are updating. It does pre-fill in your license details with a farm. You can choose your plan. Most folks, level 1 is all you'll ever really need. If you ever need to upgrade, you can do so at that point. But at this point, most folks don't ever have more than maybe 1 or 2 users. And even then, sometimes folks share accounts. But I would say you want to choose level 1. For me and my purposes, because I'm not using a coupon code today, I will choose free, but we'll demonstrate this for a moment. For level 1, we'll come to the coupon code in a second, but for the add-ons, automatically advanced crops and Vermont NMP are checked. Please leave those checks. Those are the ones that are required components of GoCrop to meet Vermont state standards. If you're interested in grazing or the analysis tools, you can add them now, you can add them later. They're at no additional cost. For the purposes of just getting through a new NMP, I would recommend just staying with advanced crops and Vermont NMP. If you're interested in any of those other two, there's staff that are happy to help walk you through how to use those. So there's question automatically renew. My recommendation here is to click no, because if you click yes, it's going to try to automatically renew every year, and you may or may not want that. All right, so for folks who are just now with us creating their plan, a lot of people are covered under the 2024 RCPP code. Yes. I think Susan's going to throw that in the chat. So that's 2024, all caps, RCPP. Is that here?
I guess RCPP.
Yes.
If you are updating and you are a certified small farm, medium farm, or large farm operation, any or operation that's 50 cows or more, there is another coupon code, certified 100, certified's all caps, 100, 100. If you're a small farm, it's like less than 50 cows, that's small farm, all caps 50. And I think Susan's throwing those in the chat as well for reference. If you have any questions about this or have any challenges getting past this point, please feel free to contact anybody. All right, so for me, I'm going up to my trial so I can move forward in this. I save my license. Okay. And now you can see here that we have our license details, got our farm name, the plan we're in, and then this is important, right? We got status, it's active. And then also very importantly, when it expires. For me, because I have that free 30-day trial, it ends in a year, or sorry, in a month. For everybody else who might have used one of the other codes, it would be a year.
Can you show us the chat?
Yes.
Yeah. I think they're enclosures within paddock is the way that they're usually described in holistic medicine.
You ready? All right. So I'm gonna log out now. You don't have to do that, but I just want to now show you that when in your farm, you now have a work with this farm. If your license has expired, you will still be able to view all the data you entered, and it will say review this farm. In this section, you can also see, and you might see this from the license section you're on too. I just want to introduce you to these this menu on the side menu, where we have all farms, our access to our account, and our log out. Now for folks who are maybe in so for everybody else, you're right here right now. And what I would like you to do is press on the side menu. You can't stay in a different spot. So go to all farms. Yep. right here. There we go. So if you can click all farms here, you'll come to this section here, and then you'll click work with your farm. And this is your dashboard. And now that we're into GoCrop, we still have that side menu of farm, all farms, account, log out, and then additionally farm, fields, reporting tools, and add records. We'll get further into each one of these components later, but for now we're in farm, and then we have this 3 sub tabs within another side menu, which is our dashboard. I'm going to give you a quick orientation to this, and then I think I'm going to ask you to go into your nutrient management plan narrative. I forget what our other homework is, so, you know,
On GoPro?
yeah. But when we look in the,
Well, last year, that was all that we did. was like-
Yeah, that it's just that part.
okay, thank you, Heather, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And just making sure they fill in the livestock pieces too.
Yes,
That's not
absolutely.
always obvious, I guess.
Okay, so we got your farm details that you filled in here. Here's location from your farm details, your license. Your record years, I'm actually going to ask folks right now before we move too much further to add 2023 as a record year. And the reason why I'm asking you to do this is because you might have a record that you want to add from 2023 and GoCrop doesn't know where to put it or does not exist. So to add a year, I'll just do this again. You add the plus button, type in the year you want to add, and then click create year. There's also 2 capabilities in GoCrop. One is to import data. We'll touch on that later. Download data. At any time you can export your data because it is your data. You own it in a CSV format. And then you have a list of users here. If you ever want to add new users to your account, feel free to contact me on that. All right, so I often forget to start with the first part of GoCrop, which is creating your narrative, which is talking about the details of your farm. To do that, we need to go into reporting tools, which looks like this page with the little corner folded down on the left side. And then just like when we had to start our new farm information, we had a button up in the right-hand corner that said new farm. Now we're starting a new Vermont nutrient management plan. So we're going to click that plus button here. This will take you to a really, really, really long form. And I think that it's much more fun and visually appealing to just fill out the first section, press save, and then you get to see them a little bit more in bite-sized chunks. So let's start by doing that. You'll see that it defaults to the crop year that we're in now. So you'll want to keep that, keep the plan date that you started when we're starting it. And then it's already transferred over the farm name you chose. So now you just enter in some information about how many years you've been farming. Who the manager is, that might be the same person you put in for your profile information, your farm detail information.
The question,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean number of years I've been farming like on this property, or when did I start homestead? The reason, like I said, I'm the borrowed homestead because I didn't have a homestead.
Yeah,
I used to board my livestock at other farms.
I think you can choose what number you would like to put here. And I will say, like, I've worked with folks for years and we've never updated that number. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, the nutrient management plan itself, generally, if something like a consultant was writing it, they write a narrative about your farm, you know, like a couple of paragraphs. And so we've tried to break that kind of narrative down into these like sections. So like Lindsay said, it's kind of up to you what you put. It's not used anywhere in the plan.
You can put some notes here. There's ample space to put other notes in your narrative with question prompts. So I think for the time being, I'd recommend just skipping over this section. But here for your planner details, you're actually going to want to put Heather's information here because she's going to review your nutrient management plan and sign off on it. She is therefore your planner. There's a lot of folks here to help you plan it, but she's going to sign off on it. So please put her name here. Yeah, this is the information. So yeah, so the planner name, Heather Darby, phone number. 802-524-6501 for email hdarby@ubm.edu. Our address here is 278 South Main Street, Suite 2 in St. Albans. We are in Vermont. And our zip code will scroll here a little bit. 05478. Thank you. I'm going to pause here until I can hear the typing stop on our end.
The planner details are also on, in your binder, there's an example page and it has all the information Lindsay just typed in.
Thank
You don't
you.
have to- you don't have to memorize that.
So this is the first section where we get to where we can save the Vermont NMP. I think one thing, just as a Go Crop tip, is that there's going to be a couple of different places that you go into Go Crop and you'll have a long form. It's broken into these sections. If you start a section, you need to fill it all out to have any of the information saved. So I'm just going to stop here in this section and save my Vermont Nutrient Management Plan. Now that whole long form that we saw got broken into these different components. We've already filled out our basic information, and now we can start filling out our narrative, our manure information, tillage, watershed, and our land and livestock. I'm going to start kind of filling some of these out and hopefully giving you some tips on how to answer these, knowing that I'm probably going to go through it a little bit faster than you have time to put all your information in. But just to kind of give you an idea of what would go in there. One nice little thing too is you can pull this little corner down to give yourself a little bit more space. And we have some of these question prompts like how big is your farm? What do you grow? What kinds of management practices do you use? What do you plan to add or change in the next few years? So I'm going to make up some information. You can feel free to put in what you'd like. I think one thing to keep in mind too is that whoever is reviewing your plan doesn't see this information broken out in the way that it's presented. So, you know, if I were reading this, I might say 200 corn, no-till, nothing. And that's what the person who's reading it would see. And so it just might be nice to write in complete sentences so that it's not just like these one-word answers. And if you're thinking about adding a new practice, that could be something you would type in here too. Then to describe your typical crop rotation. So again, we're kind of asking some of the same questions here, but you could say something like, we have 20% of our land in continuous corn, or we rotate between corn and hay, or we're all grass-based livestock. For this next section, how do you determine yield goals and estimates? What we're really looking for here is that you have a way of measuring what's coming off your field and counting that measurement. So for example, if you're harvesting corn silage, you could say, I know the average weight of my truck and I count the number of loads that come off my field. Or if you're baling hay, you could say, I know that the average weight of my bale is 500 pounds and I count the number of bales I get off of a field. If you haven't kept yield records before, one thing that you could put in here is my yields are based off of estimated yields from the soil series fact sheet. And this year I will keep records on what my yields are and update my anticipated yields. So we've updated the plan narrative section here with some information, knowing that what I've put out here, especially for our farm and future plans, is pretty minimal, and I would encourage you to write a few more details in there. And then I think that some of these other pieces are a bit straightforward. So for your manure applications, to enter information to that, like all throughout GoCrop, there's this orange plus button to open up that field to be able to enter information. And so we choose from our drop-down menu, when do you apply manure? Choose the answer that most makes sense for you.
That would be the average year, not this past year.
Yes, Martha is a great question. So Martha asks, is that the average you typically do, or like what we did last year? So this is what you typically do, what you foresee yourself doing in the future. And then again, similar, how long before you incorporate your applications? Again, this is an average, and we know that we all have the best plans of how to manage our fields, but due to often weather constraints, we don't always get to achieve those best plans that we've created. But if you have a drag line or an injector, and that's primarily what you're using, then most likely it would be immediate. If you're strictly grazing animals, you could say not applicable or greater than 7, or you would choose greater than 7 days. If you are not incorporating manure into your farm, then you would choose not applicable.
What if it varies? Like all the fields this year that are near the farm
Mhm.
were all injected,
Mhm.
and the fields that are 4 miles down the road were not injected. And that was grassland, so that would have been non-incorporated. So what do you do?
I would say that in that situation, choose the one that is most representative of your land. So like maybe 10% injected and 90% not incorporated. I'd go with the 90% one. And that's a really good question. And this is just to give an overall view of what's happening on your farm, and you can then go into further detail in this narrative section. And when you are creating your plan or when you are entering records, you then choose the time by each field that you will incorporate your manure. So to your example, you say fields closer to the barn are injected and fields further are not incorporated. So in this section, when we're describing your manure management method, you can go into finer detail of breaking up how manure is applied, but also you would want to explain here, if you have a pit system, if you have a stack system, if you have more than one pit. And you might say we have a stack.
Like I know, like the reason I don't have big giant mounds of horse manure is because I let my chickens free range and they pick through it all and they spread it, they eat the larva, but.
I mean, that would be a great thing to put in your details, that like, yeah, you use a rotational system, which helps you distribute that manure. That would be great to put in
But I
there.
don't technically like apply manure at all.
Yeah, so grazing, that's another, like your manure management method is grazing, maybe. The other thing that I would suggest to also remember too is that, I don't know if this applies to any of our farmers here, but some farms, they might, generate, let's say 5 million gallons of manure, but they export 2 million gallons. That would be something to put in here, or vice versa. Maybe you're a farm that has 10,000 gallons of manure and you're importing manure. That is something else to put in here as well.
watershed, and this is something I would have to apply to those maps to figure out watershed info, right?
Yes.
Is that like homework?
Or you could look it up. Yeah, yeah. So there's a little bit on the north for tillage. We have these options: primary, secondary, and describe tillage equipment. If you're no-till, you can choose no-till. Maybe that's all you're using, so your secondary method is not applicable. And then you could, in your describe tillage equipment here, you might say, you know, the model number, how often you till, or if you don't till at all either. So in my example, I'll say we are no-till.
My problem is it's very slow, so I click it. We're all.
Don't have this.
So then we get to the watershed section, and this information is often found on one of your maps, and you're going to want to use the watershed name and hydro code that are I think where your barnstead is. So if you want to take a moment and look at your watershed maps and put that information in. In my example here, I just put in some fake numbers. So if you are in Jewett Brook, do not use this hydrological unit code. And I think one thing to note too is that in Go Crop, anytime there's a asterisk, that information is required in order for you to save that form. So if I leave this blank and I try to update it, it won't let me do that. I can always cancel and get out of it, but then none of my other information is saved.
How do we tell if it's impaired or not?
Not show, it is not impaired.
So the one of the questions we just got here was that how do we know if it's impaired or not? When you're looking at your map, there's a key. If it's impaired, it will say that it's impaired and it will tell you why it's impaired. If it's not labeled in your key, then it's not impaired and you can click no.
Yes. Would like to start.
So you can type in whatever the reasons that are listed on your map for why the watershed is impaired. And once you have that, you'll click Update Vermont NMP.
Consider the amount of farms upstream, that's right, so even happy. Tillable, I don't know if it's tillable or not.
Oh, all right. So we're gonna move on to land inventory for a moment here. So we have these owned and the leased acres. And for the purposes of your nutrient management plan, the numbers that we're using here are the numbers that are going to be in your nutrient management plan. So for example, some farms might have 200 acres, but they're only putting 100 of those acres into that nutrient management plan. So if that's, so you want to put this in as your nutrient management plan land inventory. And in your narrative, you can say, I have 200 acres, but only 100 are in. So the two things that I want to point out here, well, a number of things, is that we do have the owned versus the leased columns. GoCrop does not total them for you, so you will need to total them. And then we have these other rows: tillable, permanent hayland, permanent pasture, and woodland. So I think when we're talking about what to put into these three categories, all of your acres might be tillable, but you might have a certain percentage of them that are always in hayland. You're never planning on rotating them. So that's the number that you put in the hayland. And then maybe you have some that are in pasture. That's the number you put in pasture. The remainder that would be tillable. So if it's in continuous corn or it's something that you rotate, that goes under tillable. It's important here too that we're not double counting. That, like I said, like if you're rotating corn and hay, you're not putting that all those acres in tillable and then some of them in the permanent hay. And then you'll put your woodland at the bottom, get out your calculator, total these 4 rows, and then put your total at the top, do that for owned and do that for leased.
I mean, the whole property is about 2 acres, but then the house and the hill high isn't
Yes.
part of the
Is there
plan,
2
so
different
how do I
waterways?
determine?
On the most acreage.
Yeah, so for right now, I think. Like, or should I just not fill out my land inventory section yet until we determine that?
Yeah, so these green numbers on here should be like just this polygon right here. And then this number right here, 0.3 downside area around it. These green numbers should be like this.
For the purposes of filling out land inventory today, I'd suggest just putting in rough estimates, because one of the things that you'll do in GoCrop is enter in all your fields and that acreage. And then we can use that total to see what the total is for your owned versus leased and break these up accordingly for that. So I would put in, just to get through this section, rough estimates, and we can go back and revise this a little bit later.
And Autumn, you would totally let your chickens walk through your house, so I do think that that should qualify. And you actually do have rabbits in your basement, so there's
I
no
do have
reason
rabbits.
to cut your house off of.
But I'm not gonna be applying, yeah, I'm not tilling my base, I mean, I could, it's a dirt floor, I
It's a dirt floor.
technically could.
Well, you don't till anything. It's all the same. You don't till your basement, you don't till.
I did actually have, before I got the chicken coop set up, I did have my chickens in a pen in my basement when I first moved there last year. It was very weird hearing a rooster crowing from under my feet as I was having my morning coffee. It was a little surreal.
All right, we've got one more section to fill out here before the homework's done. So we'll just kind of work through that. And that's the livestock inventory. And it starts deceptively short, and you'll see that there becomes other options available once you fill out this piece. So our first question is it a dairy farm? I'm gonna click yes, just so we can see what that looks like. From there, you can choose the dominant breed from a drop down. If there's another that's not here that best captures what you have, you can click that. And then you write in your rolling herd average. I'm just gonna put a random number in here. Please put one that is applicable to you. And then you'll update your Vermont nutrient management plan. And once you have that information in, then this new section pops up called animal types. And from here, you press the little plus button, and you can add as many animal groups as your heart desires here, and filling out all of this information. We do have a list of these drop downs for animal types, broken in these different components. We tried to capture what people most used without making the list too onerous. That said, we might have missed something that's really important to you. Apologize in advance for that. And if that is the case, I think we don't have an other, so just good luck and use the thing that's most relevant to you. Some of the dairy farms I work with, we have our 2 main lactating cows and dry cows, and then we choose a couple of the heifers. Really depends on how detailed folks want to get. But once you choose your animal type,
I don't know if I'm not a commercial dairy, like I just have some goats that I do milk, but like I'm not raising them predominantly for milk. Like how would I say no to being a dairy farm? Yeah.
I think
I'm not
how
selling
specific
dairy.
in Vermont, when it's
Yeah.
listed as a dairy farm, I think unfortunately it's listed as cow only.
Oh, okay, so I'm definitely not a dairy farm.
Yes.
I have no cows. There we go. Price is heard.
Well, you could tell your basement.
Right?
So once you choose your animal group, you your present number.
Cool. That makes sense.
This maximum number is how many you can accommodate at your location without meeting excess standards of space or land. So some folks might be able to have more than their present number. And then for each of your animal groups, you'll put in the average live weight. If it's a dairy cow in the situation, milk produced per head per day. Again, I'm just putting a random number in there. Then we have some questions about like if they're always confined. In my example, I'll say yes. If you click no, nothing changes. And then you can choose the grazing type. If I click, then yeah, do that. And then you can put your stocking rate in, which is the number of animals you have per acre. This information isn't connected to anything else really in GoCrop necessarily. So it's just to kind of describe on average the number and types of animals you have over the course of a year. So then once you do that for the animal groups that are most applicable to you, you have successfully created your farm narrative. And I am going to just prime the pump a little bit, plant the seed in there that with a lot of things with GoCrop, as you go through it, your plans might change or how you view things might change a little bit. And it's really common that at the end of your plan, you might come back to your narrative and say, oh, I need to update this. And you'll see that a lot throughout GoCrop as you're becoming more familiar with the program and what it's asking for and how things all work and interplay with it.
Here's a quick question.
Yeah.
If we're saying for my plot, so technically I own 28 goats, but 8 of them are at his property. So do I not count those 8?
I think my question, because this is a nutrient management plan, so we're talking about nutrients. Where's the poop going? Is it going to his land or your
Well,
land?
the 8 goats on his land or his land. So
Yeah.
are you counting my 8 goats as
Yes.
yours? Okay.
Yeah.
Or I mean, another way, yeah, around that too.
I'm
is
just like when
you
people
can,
ask me how many goats do you have, and I was like, oh, well, technically I have this many, but 8 of them are not on my property. So
Yeah.
it's like,
and that would be something great to put in the narrative. So one of the questions that came up over here is, what if I have some animals on my property and some animals on another property? And for the purposes of a nutrient management plan, we're really trying to account for where that manure is going. So we would say for that case that maybe that the number of livestock for your inventory might be what's on your property, but you could put in your narrative, I own 50 cows, but 20 of them are on my neighbor's property type of situation.
yeah, because it's like a fuzzy.
So I think just to kind of wrap this section up, because I think folks are going to be working on this for homework. And I want to just start from the very beginning of what you're going to do when you're at home. You're going to open up your browser, hopefully Chrome. You've already signed up. You've already created an account. So you're going to go to sign in. Because I already saved my information, my email address and password is saved. But once you enter in that information, you'll come to your farms. You'll click work with this farm. And then you'll say, where do I find the narrative? Where do I enter that detail information? I'm gonna crowdsource right now to see if anybody was paying attention. Which tab do I go to? So quick. Yes, you go to reporting tools with the paper. We already created our NMP plan, and then you can click the blue button and it will take you to, not that, don't click the blue button every time. Okay, click the orange button and that will take you to the form to look at your information or long form style. And that is that. Heather, do you have any last words you'd like to say to wrap up?
Nope. I think as long as people are clear what their homework is, that's all I would wrap up with. And you should have time to finish that now. So one thing I didn't say is we try to present all the material usually before lunch, have lunch, and then try to use the rest of the time to do homework to make sure that you know how to navigate GoCrop and where to get the information. So the remainder of our time today will be spent helping you navigate GoCrop and making sure you know what to do and maybe even to finish it before you leave. So that's it. I'm not sure if anybody online was planning to stay on or not, or wanting help, but if you are, if you could let us know, because otherwise we're gonna stop the recording and yeah,
I am
wrap
gonna
this up.
stop, I am gonna stop the recording, but I did have a request for one breakout room. So I will create that as well.
Okay. So we'll leave the online portion going in case anybody